one of the things you heard at the beginning of the day from Brad Karp was that he told his partnership that we are in perilous times. And so what we wanted to do is spend the next 20 minutes or so having you hear from these very experienced business leaders at their law firms from different lenses and get an understanding of how they're navigating that and how they're guiding their firms to be able to differentiate and to be able to create value for the clients in today's environment. And to start with that, first let me just welcome to the stage Jennifer Manton. She is the Chief Marketing and Business Development Officer of Kramer Levin. And next to her is Rachelle Rennagel, who is the e-discovery counsel and Director of Research and Information Services at White & Case. And Blane Prescott, who is the Chief Operating Officer at Foley and Lardner. And I'm going to have Blane kick us off because when we all sat down and tried to figure out what are one of the things that really drives this conversation in these law firms, understanding compensation models and figuring out where those challenges are seem to be a common theme. So I'm going to ask Blane to begin this conversation and talk to us a little bit about what are the myths and what are the things that we need to address.
Okay. You know, one of the things you've heard about throughout this program is how much change is going on in the world. And one of the assumptions behind all the change is, we've got to change the incentives for people. We've got to get them to behave in the way we want them to. Unfortunately, one of the things that we've discovered over the years is that despite all of the myths, it's actually really hard to get people to change. A lot of people assume that you can get everybody to change because you change their compensation. And so what I thought I would do is just go through and talk a little bit about some of the counterintuitive myths about compensation and how it does or does not work. And the first one I had mentioned to you is that you really can't incent somebody to get a personality. You know, one of the things that everybody assumes is that if I pay you enough money, I can get you to leap over tall buildings. I can get you to, suddenly be taller. And you know what? There's about 50 years worth of good, solid research that says economic incentives work really well on mechanical tasks. If I tell you to move more chairs from this side of the room to that side, money helps. But the moment we add cognitive skills into that, money actually makes things go worse. And you might say, how can that possibly be? Our whole society is based on money incentives. The truth is, money incentives really just act as a filter. They tell you who has the skills. They don't create them. Again, a complicated topic, but one that's worth spending some time on at some point. Second thing, one of the changes going on in the world is there's more and more data. We can measure everything, especially in law firms these days. We can measure the profitability of you, your practice group, your department. We can correlate it to how many billable hours you have, your shoe size, whatever it is, we can tell you about your profitability. A lot of people always assume that if I can figure out your profitability, I know what I should pay you. The truth is, law firms have been fooling around with profitability-based compensation programs for a long time, and one of the things they discover is if what you actually do is just pay people the profit they generate, you end up with a less profitable law firm. People tend not to cooperate with one another. People hate the significant ups and the significant downs that they go through. Not so much the ups, they're good with that part of it, but when their profitability goes down, they can't handle that. Third thing, profits do not equal compensation. Like I just said, if you can calculate somebody's profitability, it doesn't necessarily mean that's how much you should pay them. Fourth one, kind of an interesting idea here. We, for 25 years, I was a consultant and sat on a lot of compensation committees. And one of the things that we would come across from time to time is you'd find a law firm or an in-house counsel that was doing a good job of paying everybody. They were paying people exactly in line with all of their peers. And yet, all of their people were unhappy about it. They were unhappy for all sorts of reasons. They didn't like the process. They thought it was too mysterious. There was no predictability. One of the things that, again, good research will show to you over and over and again, just because you produce good results doesn't mean good compensation results, doesn't mean that you'll make people happy. One of the most fundamental aspects of compensation research is that the process you go through that creates a sense of fairness is every bit as important as the results. That may not seem intuitive, but it's really the case. Fifth thing, a little bit more focused on law firms, pre versus post compensation interviews. Corporate America, standard policy is we go off, we set your compensation, then we come back and sit down and talk to you about it, tell you how you did. Oddly enough, for partners in law firms, that tends not to work nearly as well as talking to them before you set their compensation. You end up having people dramatically more happy, and probably the easiest way to explain this, the difference between a pre and post-compensation interview. Post-compensation, I'm explaining how and why I judged you. If it's a pre-compensation, I probably tend to be talking about more of the future, how to help you, how you can do possibly better. And then the last one, one of the things you constantly hear about compensation is, what we need is transparency. It should be crystal clear how we set compensation. Anybody should be able to look at the data and figure out why you paid everybody exactly what you did. A cool little theory, doesn't work in reality. If you've ever set compensation, you know the complexities, all the things that go into it. But what I find is that more than just transparency, what people are really meaning, they don't want to be surprised by the results, and they want to have a sense of fairness, that this was accomplished in some way that creates a sense of trust in them. Again, 6 big topics. If you're talking about all the changes going on in the world, you want to change people to go along with those changes. Compensation is important. It's not nearly as much as the magic cure that everybody wants to believe it is. And some of the things that we assume about compensation as being truthful actually doesn't stand up to good science. So that's sort of my lead off to the conversation.
Yeah, that's terrific. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. And Jen, tell us a little bit about, in that context, what are the top 3 things that you're preparing your firm for today, knowing that these pressures are not going away for tomorrow's client?
So in preparing for this presentation, I gave a lot of thought to the definition of value, which in its most simplest term is obviously paying a fair price for a product or a service. Of course, it's a lot more complex when you're providing legal services, and there's many nuances to that. But one of the things that I sort of espouse at Kramer Levin in terms of our client relationships is one size fits one. Every client, and we've all sat in front of the general counsel panels and heard 4 or 5 different variations on what they value most in their law firm. And while there is a commonality to that, there are always little differences. And as someone who went to journalism school and specialized in public relations, the first thing I learned was know your audience. So that's the first thing that we try and make sure that the lawyers understand. And while it's one size fits one, you can sort of systematize and make more routine that intake process, whether it's a new client or even a new matter, because while you may have been working with a client for a long time, it might be a new matter. There's a new team of lawyers that you're working with. And so there's a lot of soft things that you need to do to really understand what are the stress points. How does the client want to receive regular updates or communications from the firm? Do they want more transparency on the work that's being done, or they just want to be kept up to date? In addition to that, there's sort of 3, I think, things that we can really do and that I see as my role in driving our ability to provide better value. The first is making sure our lawyers are proficient in project management. And that really starts with the budgeting process and breaking down the matter and being able to communicate early and often with the client and managing those expectations. But there's a lot of training that has to go along with that, and systematic changes within the law firm about how we collect data and report data and share that data. You have to have everyone talking to one another and on the same page in agreement about that, which leads me to my second thing that I spend a lot of time on, and that's trying to facilitate better collaboration within the firm. I think this morning we heard about cross-selling and how that can be such a challenge. Another comment that was made is that because of training in law school, there's really an individual mentality and approach that they take to the profession. So trying to change all of those things takes a lot of focus and a lot of thought, but there are things that we can do to influence more collaborative behavior. Obviously, compensation is one of those, and valuing the contribution of a team as opposed to the contribution of an individual. And in The third thing is a lot of focus on training and really preparing lawyers to not just be good legal technicians, but to have the softer skills, to understand client expectations, to manage to those client expectations, to understand the drivers, the sort of those soft things that may not be so evident in the simple transaction that we're doing.
And Rachelle, I would imagine that in your world specifically that intersects with the technology that's
Yeah.
in the firm,
Yeah.
there's an impetus to just buy new technology to bring efficiency in the firm.
Yeah, so
what are you preparing your firm for?
So let's just say one thing. I believe technology is a fantastic enabler, and I don't think it is the answer, because at the end of the day, technology can only get you so far, but it really is about sort of how you use that technology. And I manage two rather distinct groups at White & Case, the research team and the e-discovery team. And I'm part of an overall knowledge management team. And I have to say that White & Case has a spectacular commitment to sort of, let's call it practice efficiency, right? How can we sort of, as you know, with a lot of the initiatives that are happening right now, a lot more clients want to understand how the sausage is made, so to speak, right? Operationally, how are you doing what you were doing? Are you as efficient as possible? And frankly, we're incentivized to be as efficient as possible with fee pressure, with different types of fee arrangements, capped fees, you name it. So that's really, White & Case has been really committed to figuring out, what can we do to make our lawyers more efficient, our practice more efficient, and really provide more value for our clients above and beyond the spectacular delivery of legal services. And so one of the phrases that I love, and I take no credit for it, is that the knowledge management team at the firm really acts as a force multiplier for our attorneys. And I think that we're really focused on that. We, as a knowledge team, how can we take our lawyers, who are all fantastic, and multiply that by a factor of 10, leveraging things like technology, process improvement, legal project management, things of that nature. I have, like I said, two very distinct groups, and so the strategy is distinct, but at least with e-discovery, the focus has been on how can we build a better mousetrap, right? So we know that there are those services that we deliver that our clients value highly. Then there's those services that, yeah, they value it, but the margins are really low. So we know we still need to deliver that. We know we still need to deliver high quality, high value product. How can we do that? And I have the benefit at White & Case where we have a shared services center in Manila and an operations center in Tampa. So we have some really fantastic levers that we can use sort of to rethink how we do things. And so so with the e-discovery aspect, it's been really rethinking how we can deconstruct that business and identify those elements that can be done in just a more cost-efficient location versus being in our offices. Now, I know a lot of people don't have the benefit of that, and I think it's just still the way that you approach it, right? And so I think there's been a huge emphasis on legal project management for lawyers, right? So deconstructing the practice, the steps, so that we can enable it. But it's the same thing. It's sort of taking that, drinking our own champagne, and applying that to the e-discovery process. And for me, it's the research team. And so one of the things with research is, for those of you who work in law firms, libraries have come under a tremendous amount of scrutiny. There's a lot of talk about, should they be fully outsourced? Do we need them? And it's an opportunity to rethink how we deliver research. Now, asking the very provocative questions, do lawyers need to do research? It's a good question. So we're asking those questions, right? Could we get highly skilled researchers to do some of the research work? Because we all know our clients don't want to pay for first and second year associates. They just don't. But we all know that, especially for our litigators, research is really core to how we deliver client services. So can we rethink the delivery of research services? And that's something that we're doing. So in terms of deconstructing the business, it's disaggregating the sort of administrative, non-client facing sort of work that goes into running a research team, and figuring out better ways to do that, more efficient ways to do that, and then elevating research. So it's and that's just with the two groups that I lead, but I could go on and on. I mean, with our knowledge team, we're really focused on how do we enhance collaboration, right? So we offer technology tools, but again, it's not just about technology, it's about process, it's thinking through the use cases. we have a tremendous team of practice support lawyers who are non-fee earning attorneys who really are just there to support our attorneys. One of the great things that they've done, for example, is created something called Matter Pathways, which are, I'm not going to do it justice, but basically how-to guides. If you're a first-year associate and you are staffed on an M&A deal, what do? Right? And it's a combination of here's how you do it at White & Case, and here's all the external resources that are available at your disposal. And it took a fair bit of time to pull that together, but in terms of making our younger associates sort of productive more quickly, it's a fantastic tool. So, it's definitely a huge emphasis at White & Case.
Yeah, great. So before I give the audience an opportunity to ask you all a couple of questions as well, I wanted to go back and ask Blane, tell us a little bit about how your role has changed. How is this conversation around value changing the way your role is in the firm?
I think one of the big changes that we're seeing is that law firms are getting away from the idea, this is certainly not that new, that we don't necessarily have to have lawyers doing everything. Increasingly, I've done roughly 2,000 client interviews in my life, and I'm not a lawyer. But having somebody who is better at spending time with someone and extracting information from them, and who is trained in how to change the behavior of other people, that's a big change. I think having, for example, we, like many firms, we're always out there exploring growth opportunities. I do a lot of our lateral hiring. I've done that for many years now. Instead of having one of our lawyers come out and try and get you in, we've actually had more success using non-lawyers, getting partners from other law firms to join us. So I think the key is getting away from the very traditional role that everything has to be done by a partner in the firm. There might be other people who are better trained, better experienced, who can come in and do those things and do them more effectively.
Yeah. And Jen, for you?
I think for those of us in the marketing and business development role in our firms, it's there's never been a better opportunity, really. We're no longer at the front end of the equation where we're just trying to build awareness for the firm or promote the reputation or help the lawyers be able to, close the sale and develop the business. But I think the real opportunity for us, and this is where I enjoy spending most of my time, and the 3 examples I gave earlier are an indication of that, is that now we're really helping to influence the client experience. So whether that's through training our lawyers to be better service providers, introducing and sort of being the champion for project management, client feedback, creating strategic account management programs in the team or within the firm. That's really about maintaining the client relationship and building the client relationship. So certainly there's a business development aspect in that, but that's where my passion is, and there's just been quite an evolution in my role. 22 years now doing this, so it's great.
And Rachelle?
I echo a lot of your sentiments, which is, looking at, well, first of all, I always treat what I do as a business within a business, and I think even more so now we're called upon to do that. And I think understanding that our clients are disaggregating services, our clients are recognizing those tasks that used to be firmly in the back pocket of attorneys are no longer the case. We as law firms have to think about that, but it's also an opportunity, right? And I think when I think about my research team, it's actually an opportunity to elevate the value of the services they deliver, right? Because absolutely all research should be ultimately supervised and approved by an attorney, but why not have someone who is skilled and an expert in search and retrieval and understands the myriad of sources that are out there, do that initial pass, right, in 1 hour versus an associate going out and doing it in 5-6 hours. So it's thinking critically more about those various tasks and skills and thinking about the ways you can skill up your team, I think, as well. So while it certainly has forced a change on me, it has forced a change on my teams. So they have to function differently. They are called to be more proactive, more solution-oriented, more innovative, because it's really not just up to senior leadership to figure all this out. We are an integral part of that solution. So
we have just about a minute left, but I did want to give the audience an opportunity if there's a question that you all would like to ask from these leaders. Yep. Just give it just a moment here.
What kind of people do you get for your research? If they're not, excuse me. What kind of people do you get for your research team if they're not lawyers?
Yeah, so actually we have, for example, what we're finding is that there are a number of lawyers, they either have JD or JD and MLS degrees, which are the librarian degrees, who are in the market, who that's what they want to do, right? And either it's people who've self-selected out of the traditional associate path because they don't want to do it, right? We talked about the need to sort of make associate work more sexy. And so there's all types of people. There are people who are, this is what they do. They're trained in data analytics, right? So we're starting to see that it's not just research, right? It's not go out and find me this case or go out and pull me this article. It's really give me an analysis of, this company's competition and their patent portfolio and where we think that there's opportunities, right? So it's people who can think critically. And one of the areas we're exploring is we are embedding researchers within practices because the knowledge is so specific. So I think you can find that there are former practicing attorneys who want to do this. There are people who have trained to be expert researchers. There are people, frankly, who have 10, 15 years of experience under their belt. So there's a wide market for individuals who this is what they want to do.
What, if anything, is the differential in the pay scale?
It's a big difference, especially in light of the recent associate pay bump, right? So depending on the market you're in, a skilled researcher could be anywhere between, again, depending on where they're physically located, it could be between $70,000 to $100,000. It's a lot cheaper than associate. First, second, yeah, exactly.
So we're just running a little bit over time, so I will draw this panel to a close, but I know at least Jen has promised me, and we're going to convince Rachelle and Blane to join us for some future programming. And in the meantime, I'm sure they'll be happy to answer questions after the sessions as well. So,
Okay.
thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks.